Welcome to that painting tutorial where we will be painting Petri from Daybreak Miniature, which is one of the two miniatures that are available on my Patreon this month. So I did prime it with black and white primer in a zenithal way, so you can have a quick turn around of the model. So I did it with the airbrush, but you can actually do it with a rattle can. I also took another base from Daybreak Miniature just to make better scenery for Petri. So the first thing that we will do is actually paint the skin, as it's one of the hardest thing to do with the brush. So we will do it with the airbrush to get it easily done. We will only have to do some correction with the brush at the end. So let's start with the skin. For the skin color, I will start with dark flesh tone from Valero Game Air, Barbarian Flesh, and light flesh from Model Color. I always tint my paint 50-50, even if it's airbrush ready paint. I use a towel just to see if everything is alright. Everything seems fine. So I start doing my shadow, and I will only airbrush from under the model, as I will use the same color for almost all the base coat of the model. I will just airbrush most of the parts at the same time. The beard will be brown, so I'm just adding that base coat also. What I want to do is to keep some areas white to have brighter highlights. So I'm going into multiple thin coats. So why I am doing all the parts the same color is just because the way I work, I am glazing and changing the color later. So even if I'm using the same base color, they will all be very different at the end. It does not have to be perfect. This is just to have our base coat done quickly. Once it's done, I will clean the airbrush. I will go with the Barbarian Flesh. So now I will go from over the model. This is where I will start using those white areas that are left on the model to get brighter highlights. So this way, as you can see, I keep my lines that are very dark. I go with very thin layers. I can let it dry a bit between the coats. You can also do it with the brush, but of course it will be a bit longer and you will not be able to achieve nice blendings right away. Right. So I do have my mid-tone on the model. You can see that I start having my shadows, my mid-tone, and now I will just add a little bit of light flesh to my mix to do the final highlights. So now I'm being more careful. I don't want to put that color everywhere, only in the brightest spots. So on the top of the head. Not more than that for the moment. We are back with the web palette cam now. The first thing I will do with the brush is actually to make a very thin shade with Agrax Earthshade. It will blend everything together that I did with the airbrush, and it will get some outlining of the surface. So we will give back a warmer tone to the skin. We will get a better definition around the skin area. So it's a very controlled and thin layer of wash. I don't want it to pool anywhere except on the edges to make a line that will separate like the metallic from the arm from the cloth. So these are the only lines that I really want to have and see. Otherwise it's a very small, almost a glaze. If we see any pooling that we don't want, we can get rid of it while it's still wet. So after this, we will start building the highlights. For the brushwork, I will use Barbarian Flesh, Cadian Flesh Tone, and Light Flesh. So what I will actually do is I will mix 50-50. I'll try to get my wet palette at a good spot. I will mix 50-50 with my Barbarian Flesh and Cadian Flesh Tone. And I will start working my highlights. So if you you don't really know where to put your highlights, this is where the zenithal highlighting for the primer is very nice. You can take a picture of your model before you start painting. So if you don't know where to put your highlights, you just check back the picture and you are able to see where the white primer is. When doing skin, you can also stipple just to give a little bit of texture to the skin, as it's normally not totally flat. So for stippling, you just take diluted paint and you make a lot of small dots. So we are done with that coat of paint. I can still adjust some little things by stippling, adding thin layers here. It's good. So now we'll go with Cadian Flesh Tone only. So this is what I do when I switch between colors. I always do a layer with my previous color mixed with my new color. So I will apply my highlights, but I will do it in smaller areas, always trying to follow the zenithal highlights that I did. And I will make the final stage by mixing Cadian Flesh Tone and a little bit of light flesh, just to show you faster how to do it, and then I will finish it on the old model. I'm not blending right away. I will use glazing and airbrush glazing to finish my blendings at the end. Don't worry if you don't have an airbrush. I will show how to do it with the brush also. These are the final highlights, so in a very smaller area. On the edge of the muscles. And you apply coats until you are happy with the highlights you did. Can even add some small spots of light flesh as a final highlight. So at the end, I will glaze all this, and I will come back to make some correction on the highlights. But that gives an idea on how I do it for the moment. So I will go on the full miniature to finish all these steps. So I'm going to do the final highlights with the stippling technique. So what I will do, I will only put paint in the brightest spots. Don't have to blend them very well. I'm going to airbrush over it after to blend everything. So what I do is you can draw lines and then blur them by stippling around it. So I will push the highlight a bit too high because the airbrush glazing will actually tone down everything. So I will go even more higher in the highlight than that. To stay on camera would be interesting. So you can see that the highlights are exaggerated. Then what I will do is I will take my hairbrush with the mid-tone. I will start with the mid-tone, which means Cadian flesh tone, and I will start glazing over just to blend everything. But you can see that most of the skin is done. Now I will blend everything together, and I will finish up the work once the glazing will be done, because I will also add, after glazing with the mid-tone, I will glaze with the darker color to get my shadows back a bit, and I will add some red on like the elbows and some places to get more values to my skin tones. So let's get the airbrush out. And let's start glazing. So for glazing, I will dilute my paint to a very high ratio, like 10 drops of water to 1 drop of paint. So it's a really small amount of paint. Kinda airbrushing colored water. I don't really want to have a thick paint. So if I do it on my glove, you will see that it's not coloring at all. I need to have a good amount to start seeing the color. So it's a really thin layer of paint that I am airbrushing everywhere. So what I can do is actually to make it dry with the airbrush at the same time as I had a thin layer, and then I just take the air, no paint from the airbrush, and I make it dry. So I will do the face first. I'm working to blend all the highlights together. So as I am airbrushing very diluted paint, I will have to do maybe 10 or 12 layers, but with the airbrush it's taking like 2 seconds per layer. It's already starting to be a bit better with the blendings. I will let the face dry and I will start doing it on the arms. So what I want to do is to actually tone down all the bright highlights that I did on the arms. So I'm just adding a layer everywhere. It's blending everything slowly. You can see that on the face, I'm pretty close to what I'm looking for the blendings. There is no more big spots of highlights, anything. So you can see the highlights, but they are mostly all blended. So on the edge, maybe 2 or 3 more coats and it will be done. Then I will be able to start finishing the skin. So you do it until you are happy with the result. And then you switch for the darkest color to build back your shadows. So I'm quite happy right now with the face. Of course, I will have a lot of touch-ups to do around the eyes and things like that, but the most important thing is to have a good overall look with the face. So I will need a few more layers on the arms. And we will switch. On the right. I can come back with the mid color later if I want to, but it's harder to do with the darkest color. Right, so you can see the blendings on the bright areas are quite good. Now it's all about blending those shadows a little bit more softly. So I will clean the airbrush and I will go and do the shadows. So for the cleaning the airbrush, as usual, I am adding water, taking everything out with a pipette, and I switch color. So I will go with my darkest color, which was dark flesh tone. I will only add 2 drops, as this is airbrush paint. Test it on my glove, so you can see there's almost no color. It's a little bit easier to see because it's darker than the other color, but there is almost no color. So I'm being careful now, as this one will be easier to see. Dark colors are always covering a bit much. So I'm trying to hold the model to get only the shadows covered by the paint. And I'm working to slowly blend the shadows. So this is the same process multiple times, going over. just to soften every transition. Alright, so I would stop there for the skin with the airbrush glazing. What I will do now is add more tonalities to the skin. So I will switch the brown for a dark red. To glaze the elbows. So same process with a dark red, which is gory red here. So it will be a very small amount, so 1 drop. You have to learn to play with the dilution of your paint, as depending on how strong you want your glaze to be. So what I will do is only aim at the elbow and do multiple coats, very small coats, and I will make them dry to get some kind of reddish elbow. This. So normally I would also do it a little bit on the face, but it's a bit harder. You need to be very careful when doing so. If you had too much, it will not look good. So instead you can do this part with the brush, where you can see. If you are careful, you can do it with the airbrush. So I will clean the airbrush. We are now done with the glazing. What I will do is actually finish the cleanup of the skin. And do a little bit of highlights back. So let's close this. And let's start working back on some highlights. This is where I start making the wrinkles. if I see any transition that I don't like, I just stipple around. To make the transition better. I will also start working around the eyes. We'll go back with the bigger brush. And at this point, this is where I will do the eyes. So I have all my mix to do the skin. So if I do anything wrong with the eyes, I have all the colors to fix it. Alright, for doing the eyes, I am taking some black that I will dilute a bit, or you can take black for airbrush. So I dilute it and I put a very thin coat, so it's actually only doing the outlining of the eyes. So sometimes the eyes are really hard to reach, because like on this case I got the X in the way to get a good best angle to work on the eye. Right. So I did get a little bit of black outside the eye. I will wait until I am fully done to correct it. So to do the inside of the eyes, I'm taking an off-white. And you can add, depending on, this one is a bit yellow. If yours is not yellow, you can add a little, only a little bit of yellow in it. I will add just a little bit to give an idea on how much yellow you have to add. It's really not a lot, just to change the color, because the inside of the eyes are usually having a yellow tint. here we go. I'm testing. I'm always doing lines on my glove just to check. Did I have enough paint? Not too much. And I'm trying to leave only a very thin black line around the eyes. And if it's not good enough, I just redo a small black line until I am happy with the result. Right, this is not so bad, as I will add a pupil after. This is what you are aiming for. So if the eyes are not looking like they are the same shape, you can try to actually fix them with black to give them a closer shape. But obviously this sculpt has an eye smaller than the other one. And then you can fix the around the eye if there was some black. That was not applied correctly. Alright. So now you can do the pupil. At this scale, I don't add much color to the pupil, as we don't see it much. You need to be very, very close. Of course you could. So what I do is I try to do a black circle like this. I will get it a bit bigger so it looks like staring in front of him. Same thing on the other side. I will have to correct again under the eye. This one is a little bit harder to reach. So the only thing that would be missing is some small reflection dots. And then you do the final highlights under the eyes. Right, we start having a face there. That is interesting. What I will do is I will glaze a little bit more red with the brush, as I have more control with the brush than I had with the airbrush. So very diluted red around the nose here. We'll add a little bit of red also here. All right. So we have the face that is almost ready. So when the beard will be done, it will look a lot better than that. But you have the main idea of the face. So I will do the same thing with all the skin parts around, and we will be able to switch painting the shirt. So I will accelerate the process about the skin painting. Right now the look was pretty good. Alright, that would end up the process for the skin. Maybe I will touch it a bit at the end to get everything correct, but that's it for the skin.